Public Safety Work Group will now begin.
This meeting is being recorded and or transcribed.
Welcome to this virtual meeting of the Charter Commission's Public Safety Work Group. This meeting includes the remote participation of members as authorized under Minnesota Statute Section 13D.021 due to the declared local health pandemic. For the record, my name is Andrea Rubenstein, and I am chair of the Charter Commission's Public Safety Work Group. I will now call this meeting to order and ask the clerk to call the roll so that we may verify the presence of a quorum.
Chair Clegg.
Here. Here.
Commissioner Alvaro Giro Isaacson.
Here.
Commissioner Andy Kozak.
Here.
Commissioner Matt Perry.
Here.
You've been muted. To unmute yourself, press *6.
Present.
There are 6 members present.
Thank you. Let the record reflect we have a quorum. We will now proceed to our agenda, a copy of which was posted for public access to the city's Legislative Information Management System, which is available at lims.minneapolismn.gov. Okay, now we'll have the commissioners. The agenda for today's meeting is before us. May I please have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved, Giro Isaacson.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a proper motion before us. Is there any discussion before the clerk calls the roll? Hearing none, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll on the motion.
Chair Clegg.
Aye.
Commissioner Alvaro Giro Isaacson.
Aye.
Commissioner Andy Kozak.
Aye.
Commissioner Matt Perry.
Aye.
Commissioner Lyle Schwarzkopf.
Present. Aye.
Commissioner Andrea Rubenstein.
Aye.
There are 6 ayes.
Thank you. The motion passes and the agenda is adopted. I believe we should be dedicating most of our meeting today to the proposed amendment drafted by Commissioner Jerome Isaacson, but I did have a couple of short reports for you before we get started on that. First of all, you may recall that Commissioner Perry at last week's meeting had requested responses from Mayor Fry and Chief Arredondo concerning the draft amendment that we're going to be looking at again today. He also requested information on the timing of the various city studies that are in progress. We did receive responses from the mayor and Chief Arredondo about Commissioner Jerome Isaacson's proposed amendment. Members of the Charter Commission have seen these responses, but not necessarily everyone listening in. And so I'll just read them. Fortunately, they're not too long. Mayor Fry says, unlike the council's proposed amendment, the Charter Commissioner's proposal is far more straightforward and clear. It properly places debates over full-time equivalents in the budget process, which is where these discussions should take place anyway. Unlike the council proposal, the Charter Commission proposal does not alter the charter to have the head of public safety/chief report to 14 individuals. I do not support such a change as it would reduce accountability and inhibit clarity of direction. I understand that the two proposed amendments are not mutually exclusive, but the differences help to highlight my reasoning. Thank you. And then from Chief Arredondo, we received the following message. As chief of the Minneapolis Police Department, I've reviewed the proposed charter amendment submitted by the Minneapolis City Council, as well as the proposed charter amendment brought forth by Commissioner Jerome Isaacson. While not officially endorsing either charter amendment proposal, I do, however, strongly believe Commissioner Jerome Isaacson's proposal that removes language specific to minimum police staffing levels is grounded in sound judgment, reason, and foresight. Based on my assessment, if I were placed in a position of having to choose between the two proposals, I would choose Commissioner Jerome Isaacson's amendment proposal. And if the work group so desires, we could put those two responses in the chat for people to see. On Commissioner Perry's third request, we did, as far as I know, we have not yet received any response on where the city is on the various studies related to the police department. I also thought, on a different matter, that a paper we received in one of the many email comments was worth pointing out and posting in our research and reference file. The paper is a proposal about a potential crisis response pilot project, and it contains a good deal of information about the state/county/local crisis response system. And so I thought it would be useful for us to have to see that and for the public to see it. I've received permission from the authors and to go ahead and post it. And so presumably we'll do it. I also asked them for a little more about themselves, and they said they would send a bio, but I have not received that yet. So that is my report. So I would, unless are there any questions or comments?
Commissioner, I just have a short announcement if I could.
Sure.
At tonight's public hearing, I'm going to be a little bit stricter about getting neighborhood and location information for the callers. We have some anecdotal information that there may be some callers from out of state or from outstate Minnesota who do not live in Minneapolis. So I'm just going to be a little more precise about asking for that information. I'm still not going to require people to give their street address because people are sometimes uncomfortable doing that, but I will ask them for their neighborhood and the nearest intersection.
Thank you, Chair Clegg. Any other comments or questions before we move on? Commissioner Perry.
Yes, Madam Chair. Could you go back over the report that you said that we had received? What jurisdiction was that covering?
Minneapolis.
And did it include the county as well?
It had some information about the interlocking system, but it was specifically a proposal about a pilot project, made vaguely in the lines that Commissioner Abbott had proposed in his substitute amendment. Okay. And they had sent it to us for that reason.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Okay. Well, next on the agenda is a discussion of an update on possible legal issues. And this is sort of a continuation of last week, and there really are not any other legal issues except that we had requested of the city attorney an opinion about our authority, our legal authority to substantively, review the a proposed charter amendment, and whether our duty was purely ministerial. And we received clarification from the city attorney's office this past week that yes, our role is not merely ministerial. And so we thank Ms. Bashoon for your quick response. And basically, her memo covers what we had previously discussed, that indeed the concept of review is much broader than simply sending it to the City Council. Commissioner Perry?
Yes, another question that I think some of the attorneys who have been serving on this committee or are observers have answered, but we didn't get an official response from the city, was whether having both items on the ballot would cause any legal complications. And as I said, I heard from some of our attorneys on the committee and observers, but I didn't see anything written or put out by the city itself.
Yes, Madam Chair. Yeah, I did not put out a written opinion. Chair Clegg advised me I didn't need to do that, but when you look at the charter itself and the state laws, there's what's called canons of construction. And so if both of these amendments would pass, if the one that you're proposing today and looking at today, if that would pass, and the one that the City Council is proposing would pass by the voters, then you would have to look at, can you harmonize those together? What is the intent? Chapter 645 of the Minnesota statutes goes into detail about those canons of construction. What is the object to be attained? And if you look at the two together, they're pretty similar in that one of the objects is to get rid of the funding requirement so that there's more flexibility. And I think they both have that in the amendments. So I think they would not be in conflict. I mean, a court could say differently, but my look at it would be that both would be eliminating the requirement to have a certain number of officers or the police force per resident. So that would be removed, and it makes sense that both of those have that same provision removed. So if both pass, I don't think you have a problem. If one passes and the other passes, I still think you don't have a problem, because some people might vote against the one that is being proposed today by Giroux Isaacson because it's a lesser provision and they want something broader with more teeth in it, they might think, with a change to the actual structure of the police department and public safety department. So some might vote against the smaller one that we're talking about today, and some might vote for the one that has more provisions in, which is fine. But I don't think that in itself is a conflict either. So that's what I would say, just looking at what typical statutory construction is. Also, the Minneapolis Charter under Section 1.3D, it does talk about the canons of construction, that in interpreting the charter, you need to look at the canons of construction under Chapter 645 of the Minnesota statutes. So it all goes together. I think there's not a conflict. Of course, if you change up the Giroux Isaacson amendment today and add more provisions, then there could be some conflict. But I think as it stands, I don't think there is.
Thank you for information. If I could just do a follow-up on that, Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
So, Ms. Bashoon, I think the Giroux Isaacson amendment specifically does not address whether the police department is removed. So it's implicitly stating that the police department would not be removed from the charter. And so I think that's a substantial difference between the two. I don't, and that's what I was trying to get at.
Right. I mean, I think that is a difference, but if if they both passed, they're both, you have to try to harmonize those two. And one is saying, we'll get rid of the requirement, the budgetary requirement, and the other is saying we'll get rid of the budgetary requirement plus do all these other things. So I would think that if both of them pass, we have to go with the one that has more provisions in it.
Okay.
Because it will effectuate both. It'll effectuate the first one, which is to get rid of the budgetary requirements, and then it would it would take care of the other one that passed, which would be to change up the structure of the police department and the public safety department of the city. So I think that's how a court would interpret it. Now I can't tell you for sure, of course, but I mean I think that's a very good argument that they really don't conflict.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Schoen. Commissioner Schwarzkopf?
I really don't understand what you're saying. If one passes and that one says we are not going to fund the police department, by the charter any longer, but says we are going to keep a police department, and the other one, because that's what the present charter says, and the other one says no, we're not going to have a police department any longer, and we're not going to fund it the way we funded past. One says we're going to keep a police department and the other one says that we're not going to keep a police department. What happens? Are you saying that the court will then say, well, because the other one says we'll get rid of a police department too, that's what really passes?
That's what I would think. If I could look further into this and put out a formal opinion if that would be needed. I mean, ultimately, the changes that you're proposing on this current one that we're looking at today is only to make some changes, and it's only to make the changes with respect to the budget, and that's all it is. It doesn't necessarily, I mean, it could be implied to say we're not going to change the structure. That's true, but the one change that is being made is the budget, the budgetary issue. And I mean, I can't 100% say what a court would do, but I would think they would try to do this canons of statutory construction and figure out how you can put those two finalized charter amendments together to make sense of them.
So what I'm hearing then is that the best if you're building now, not knowing what the court will do, the city council's charter amendment will be in effect, and that does the same thing as the General Isaacson amendment does, up for that part of police only. Is that what you're saying? That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I didn't hear that last part. Yeah, I mean,
the last part is in regards to funding. Both of them say there will be no charter amendment about funding, and so that passes for sure.
Yeah.
But what you're also saying is that you believe the court may say that the rest of the city council amendment will pass too, and we'll no longer have a police department, but we'll have a new department called something about protection.
Yeah, I mean, if they do both pass, then what will happen is I think the courts will try to look at them and try to harmonize them and try to figure out what the intent is. Basically, you could have one person that really wants all of it. The city council proposed, but they're afraid that not everybody will vote for that, so they'll vote for the other one. But in the long run, the one change that the Jerome Isaacson amendment would do is just to remove that budgetary requirement, and that's already part of the other one that the city council is proposing. I mean, I can't predict what a court will do. I can look further into it and see if there's any specific case law on that, but that's generally how I believe it would work.
Thank you.
Thank you, yeah, thanks very much.
Commissioner Abbott, do you still have your hand up?
I do. I just wanted to comment. It's not, I mean, I don't think you can really implicitly say that the Giroux-Isaacson Amendment says that the police must be retained as a charter department. I think the Giroux-Isaacson Amendment really is agnostic on that issue. And I mean, I think it's a reach. I think it's a real reach to say that they're in conflict. I mean, I think, you know, Carol is right. You know, it's hard to predict what a court will do. I mean, judges, you know, judges are human beings. They can do funky things. But to me, I think that it's pretty obvious there really isn't a substantive conflict. I just wanted to contribute my 2 cents to that. So, I mean, I agree with what Carol's saying. So,
Thank you. Chair Clegg?
I think Commissioner Abbott already said what I was going to say. So, and by the way, the thing to raise my hand has disappeared from the control bar, so I can't raise my hand. So I'll just leave you a note in chat if I want to speak.
Okay, thank you. It was noted. It's okay. Commissioner Kozak?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I guess I was going to say I agree with Commissioner Abbott, but I had with what Barry has to say, there probably isn't a significant conflict, or if there's a distinction, it's one without much of a difference. However, what Commissioner Abbott said, I think bears some additional discussion. And I don't have it in front of me, unfortunately. I've been looking for it. The text of Commissioner Isaacson's amendment. Once you take, what does it say beyond removing the minimum complement requirement? Does it talk about any additional requirement for maintaining a police department? Because I think Commissioner Abbott said implicitly, it really doesn't say, it's agnostic. So once you remove that provision, there's no requirement in the charter to have a police department. Is that correct or not?
Madam Chair, do you want me to respond? This is Casey. I'm pulling up the two amendments. I will post them in the chat. But to clarify for members, the Giroux-Isaacson Amendment merely strikes Section 7.3 within the charter. That's it, 7.3C, which is the required minimum staffing level and funding associated with it in the police department. It strikes no other provision. If, and Carol can confirm from a legal perspective, if the ballot question were submitted, that Commissioner Giroux-Isaacson has submitted, and it passed, there would still be a police department, it would still be in the charter, it would still be subject to the same appointment provisions, budgetary oversight, nothing would change except there would no longer be a minimum staffing level required. That would be the legal effect of that question passing.
I would have to agree with Casey. The other thing is just to let you know that funding provision that's being stricken, it also does talk about the ability to do a property tax up to 0.3% of the value annually. So that is another requirement that has been struck, but that all goes to the funding. And it still keeps intact the police department and the peace officers and the mayor having the authority.
Thank you.
But in reality, once that provision is stricken, the council and the mayor can take the funding for the police department virtually down to zero. Not to zero, but to maybe one cop or two, but they have total latitude. That's the idea behind this amendment. Is that right?
The issue then would be a matter of budgetary allocation, as it is for every other department, subject to both the concurrence of the city council and the mayor through a budget process. Correct.
Okay, that's the point. That it's a license to take the department down to the bare bones, I guess you might put it. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Gerard Isaacson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just going to thank the clerk for clarifying that my proposal keeps the police as it is in the charter today, and that only the provision for funding minimums and the tax, as the attorney mentioned, are stricken. There is language in the charter currently for all of the departments when it comes to the responsibility of the city council. I'm trying to pull that up here. It's 7.2, where all the departments are listed, including the police department. It says the departments generally, the city council must establish, organize, and otherwise provide for these departments. And also in letter B as in boy of 7.2, under departmental organization, the charter reads, the ordinance establishing each department must provide for an officer or a board or a commission as its head, and for any other necessary officer, and for appropriate staff and other resources. And then it mentions the mayor nominates and the city council appoints each department head. So the requirement of city council to provide for and give appropriate staff and other resources for the police department would be the same as it is for public works, for planning commission, city clerk, city attorney, city assessor, all the rest of the departments. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Which essentially makes the amendment we're considering today identical in that respect to the city council amendment. Any other comments or questions? Commissioner Schwarzkopf, did you raise your hand again?
Madam Chair, I did, but I took it back down.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? I was just going to say that without really knowing what anybody is going to do, it has been clear in this process in the last few weeks that the city is pretty significantly divided on the issue of the city council amendment, and now ours as well. And for the people who do not support the amendment, it seems...
Hold on a second.
Excuse me?
I'll take off the headset. No, I'm fine.
There's a caller who is not part of the meeting who's not muted, Madam Chair.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I was just going to say that there are so many unknowns in the city council amendment that will not be resolved for quite some time as to what it means and where the city council is going with it, that I think that if there were a challenge to the amendment we're considering today, it would be only part of a larger issue. If we have no other comments or questions, I would say let's go to our last item on the agenda, and that is a discussion of the recommendation to deliver to the full Charter Commission regarding Commissioner Gerard Isaacson's proposed charter amendment. And in that vein, I would like to ask the members of this work group to share your thoughts, if you are willing, and particularly to indicate whether or not you support this amendment. In considering the amendment, I thought it might be helpful to think about some questions and assumptions that we've been operating on. We've already talked about the legal issues, but we do have some assumptions. One is, I believe, and I might be mistaken, that no matter how we vote on the city council amendments to the charter, assuming we do vote next week, that they will appear on the ballot as drafted. And so we may want to start with that as a given. We also might assume that both amendments concern an opportunity for no funding, but ours is no different from the city council amendment in that respect, and people have expressed concern about that. So it still would remain a question with the city council amendment. I also think that we should take into consideration the impact of the second ballot. And actually, I thought about this before we just had that discussion, and we've had that discussion. And we should also consider the timing. We might want to think about whether it would be better to wait for the 2021 ballot in case the city council amendment fails, or even if it passes, because nothing has happened in the ensuing months. These are just questions that occurred to me. And so first I would ask members of the work group to suggest any other questions they have, and then perhaps we can go to what we would like to do about the amendments. Before I do that, Casey Carl has his hand up.
Madam Chair, certainly just to remind commissioners, and this has nothing to do necessarily directly with the issues before you, which are the proposed amendment by the City Council and the amendment that has been forwarded by Commissioner Giroux Isaacson, possibly to become a Charter Commission question. This body has already submitted, and today, after formal approval by Council, I submitted to the county 2 ballot questions that will, for sure, appear on the ballot this November. You may remember, we've done so much this year, there are 2 questions that will already be submitted. One is related to the timing and impact of redistricting on upcoming council elections. The other is on aligning the city charter with recent change in state election law for the timing and conduct of special municipal elections. So there are 2 questions that will already be presented this November to voters. We are now looking at question 3 and possibly question 4. So as you consider the ballot and questions like that, I wanted to remind you there are 2 questions this body has already referred to voters this November.
Thank you, Mr. Carl. So I turn this over to the work group in the hopes that Commissioner Schwarzkopf.
I had one more assumption, and that is that the purpose or the role of the Charter Commission is to find the very best structure to provide good government in Minnesota. In Minneapolis. In this particular case, we're talking about police. And so I think the assumption is that the Charter Commission's responsibility is to find the very best structure for providing public safety in Minneapolis. I would add that as one of these 2.
Thank you, Mr. Schwarzkopf. Any other comments? Commissioner Perry?
Sure, I'll get the discussion going. I do like the simplicity of this proposal, but I think we have moved a little too fast for the public to really catch up and for there to be good engagement on it. I also think in the climate that we are in right now that there is this effectively gives the council an ability to defund the police, which I am not in favor of. And so I think we have to take into consideration the politics that's going on. We can't just think about the charter as if it is in the sterile environment and not interacting with people politically and the politics of the time. And Madam Chair, you brought that up in yourself, noting that the murder of George Floyd has initiated a number of conversations and actions. And so, but I think what this ends up doing is giving and we just saw this partly through the revisions to the 2020 budget, that the council is very interested in removing funds from the police department. I think the number one reason that the number one purpose of the city is to provide public safety and public safety for all. And I think having a minimum of employees in that department is essential at this time for that to occur. So those are some of my initial thoughts on the proposal. As I said, and I should add one other thing. I feel that the City Council's proposal was rushed. They short-circuited processes to get it to us, and we have been moving very quickly. We worked as quickly as we possibly could, but we worked very quickly. And so I would find it hard to support this amendment, which has been moving even quicker, and say that the City Council amendment has been rushed, and I'm voting no on it. So those are just some of my thoughts. Thanks for listening to me.
Thank you, Commissioner Perry. Chair Clegg?
Thank you, Commissioner. First, I'd like to thank Commissioner Giroux Isaacson for bringing this forward. I think it's very worthy of consideration, and I think it's a substantively better amendment than the amendment proposed by the City Council. The history of that minimum funding provision, as we know, isn't pretty. It was basically just a battle between civic reformers and the police union, and that's the reason it's in there. But it's taken on a life of its own right now. I think it's worthy of discussion. It may even be the substitute that we might propose for the City Council amendment. But for right now, I think it's better considered for 2021. I agree with what Commissioner Perry said about timing. We've been critical of the council for the short timing, and I don't want to commit the same sin ourselves. So I would vote against.
Okay, thank you, Chair Clegg. Commissioner Kozak?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I basically concur with Commissioners Perry and our Chairman Clegg. I would like to say that I appreciate the chance for a discussion. This is probably the most substantive discussion we've had on any part of either proposal, and I appreciate what Commissioner Isaacson has tried to do. And I really, really am upset and bothered by what he's had to endure simply by trying to come up with a solution to looking for a happy medium for a problem where there probably isn't a happy medium. And I really congratulate him or appreciate what he's done to work on this. And I feel terrible at what he's had to put up with as a result. I think people have been terribly unfair, and but having said that, I have to agree that this idea is not quite ready for the voters. First of all, I think you need a compelling reason to change the charter. And while certainly the events of the last 3 months with the murder of George Floyd, that's a compelling reason to change the culture of this police department. And I think that should be the number one goal of everyone. The council, the mayor, the department itself, and us. But nothing in this proposed amendment or the council amendment moves that ball down the line, because there are so many other important changes to the department that can be made and need to be made that have nothing to do with the charter. You can go right down the list from arbitration, reform, and rules of engagement, and that sort of thing. And that's what we should be focusing on. And I think the proposers of the amendment have an obligation to show citizens just what their new vision of the department's going to look like. And of course, we've seen none of that. In fact, we know that studies are ongoing, and that the proposers don't have any idea what the new department is going to look like. So for those reasons, I think it's we need to put this off. And for this one, I know we can simply vote down. And I'm still willing to hear. I know we have one more public hearing. I'm willing to hear more from the proponents this afternoon. But for in this instance, I'm afraid I'm going to have to. I can't support the amendment. And like Commissioner Perry, I think we have an obligation to something like defunding the police department, which this amendment would virtually permit. I think we need a lot more discussion about what a new department would look like. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Kozak. Commissioner Schwarzkopf?
Madam Chair, thank you. I too want to thank Commissioner Isaacson for, bringing forth more ideas for us to look at, because I think that's really important we do that. The concern I have is that I really think our responsibility as a Charter Commission is to come up with the proper structure of the police department or whatever department it's going to be, including how we handle cases where people are mentally ill, how are we going to handle cases where there's an accident, report that or not. I mean, all these kind of things, I think, were probably, some of that was maybe done in the 911 study, which we have not seen. I know that the council has proposed another study on the police department itself. Last Friday, people that reviewed the 9 proposals were supposed to a consultant to start working with the police department, with the city council on that. I don't know if that's been done or not. I've seen the RFP that went out, but that's all I know. So I think there's just a lot of things that we don't know, and to put forth an amendment now when we don't really know the answer to these kind of things, I think is wrong. Therefore, I would suggest that we really do some studying. We really know what's going on. We really maybe try to find our own consultant, put together our own proposal, and submit it to the voters so they can vote on it in 2021.
Thank you, Commissioner Schwarzkopf. Commissioner Giroux-Isaacson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not sure if I saw another hand up before mine. I don't know if it was Commissioner Kozak or I'm happy to go if just want to jump in line here.
We won't forget Commissioner Kozak.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Madam Chair, thank you. And I want to thank the commissioners for all your comments and your support. I understand all of your points and wanting to take more time. I can understand that, but I just have to say that as a person of color and as a member of the LGBTQ community, that's something that we hear a lot when we are advocating for a change or for rights. And I'll give you an example of employment opportunities or the ability for businesses to fire a person for being gay. And I mean, we were having this debate in the 90s, the 80s and 90s, and just now in 2020, we finally are protected from losing our jobs all across the country. And I think about all the people who have lost their jobs simply for being a member of the LGBTQA community. In all of these years where we kept being told by presidents and Congress people and by states that it's just not the right time, we can't move too fast, we have to take this slower, it's not the right time. I mean, these are the things that we hear a lot when we're trying to make change. So I struggle with that while understanding the complications of these amendments and the long-term implications, but I think and I believe that the people of Minneapolis want to vote on these questions, and they want to do that in November, and they can hold the city council and the mayor accountable to that. I don't need more time to study the city council proposal, or for that effect, mine. So really, I'm left with the options of accepting, rejecting, or offering a substitute. So that's really the intent of my amendment, was to help us get something on the ballot that could move us closer towards a different type of policing in our city, that the mayor and the city council and the chief would have to work together to figure that out, while holding them the people can hold them accountable for the actions they take and participate in the conversation. So that's what I was trying to do with my amendment, and I appreciate all your comments and your support, and I thank you for that.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Abbott? Oh, I'm sorry. Commissioner Abbott, and then Commissioner Kozak. Sorry about that.
I realize I'm not a member of the work group. I don't have a formal vote here today, but I wanted to speak. I think that Al's amendment is a good proposal, and I'm in support of it. I thought his statement just now was quite eloquent for some of those reasons. I think that the problem with a lot of these charter amendments is in essence, they try to enact policy permanently into the charter. They bind future councils from being able to consider policies which otherwise might be democratically acceptable or considered. I mean, we don't know what the appropriate police staffing level will be 10 years from now or 20 years from now. I think the original provision, which was added to the charter in 1961, was a mistake. It was a mistake then. It's a mistake now, and I think the simplicity of this amendment is it eliminates that mistake. It takes a policy proposal out of the charter, and I don't think the charter is a proper place to put policy proposals. The charter ought to be a statement of organization and principles, and the voters and their representatives on the council and the mayor are the ones that ought to be in charge of how to implement those principles. And in that sense, I think that, and I don't think there's a tremendous amount of controversy. I mean, yes, we can study all of these things, and yes, the argument can be made that this gives a green light to defunding the police. But the reality is, that's the nature of democracy, it's the nature of politics, is that our elected representatives could do things which are foolish or unpopular, and that's why we have elections. And I think it's a mistake. I think it's a very fundamental mistake to write things into the charter that prevent councils down the road from changing policy. And I don't think we need to study. I don't think we need to study this. I don't think we need, unlike the city, unlike the council proposal, which I think raises a lot of issues, which we need to look at. I think this proposal is clean, it's simple, it fixes a mistake that should have never been made in the first place, and it gives the public a chance to engage on the police funding debate in November 2020, which I also think is an important consideration. So, in any event, I'm in support of this amendment, and that's the way I'm going to vote tomorrow when we decide it formally in front of the full commission. So, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Abbott. Commissioner Kozak?
Madam Chair, thank you. I think the points that Commissioner Isaacson and Abbott made are well taken. Maybe it wasn't the wisest thing the Charter Commission did back in the olden days, back in 1961 or 1962. However, as far as delaying change, I don't think we're advocating that at all, because there are so many other things that need to be addressed with this police department that can be done by the council and by the mayor, by the police department leadership, and frankly, by the state legislature. The city's going to have to go over and get some significant changes. What we do here right now is probably not going to have an immediate impact on anything. because we're still several hundred full-time equivalents beyond what the minimum is. And to do this, and to go through all this controversy and pandemonium over this, especially this amendment, which is in fact focused and simple, it's not going to delay anything. And I think we have a responsibility not just to say no, but if we decide to put this off till 2021, then I think we do have, as Commissioner Schwarzkopf suggested, we do have an obligation to put together a plan ourselves to try to get to some of the details to find out what can we do with the charter, if anything, to make things better, and or what actually is in the charter that is obstructing efforts to change and transform the department. So I don't think this is the end of it. And what I was going to suggest at one point is that this group, this work group, or some other group that the commission decides, spend the next, after the 5th, then spend the next 30 or 45 days to come up with a plan of what we can do to maybe make some recommendations so that when we do come back for the next election in 2021, we're going to give we'll give the voters something where they can make an informed decision, not, as we say, a pig in a poke, because we don't know what's going to happen. And I think we have an obligation to the citizens, if we do put something on the ballot, that they can make an informed decision. So, but I think we have an obligation ourselves to continue this work, even if we decide not to let these items on the 2020 ballot.
Thank you, Commissioner Kozak. Before we go on, I just want to mention in the chat, Commissioner Sandberg asked, isn't it up to the full commission to vote tomorrow? And yes, but I thought that it was an obligation of our workbook group to consider it and to make a recommendation if we decide to do that. Commissioner Garcia?
Thank you, Christine. I didn't expect to come up so early.
Oh, sorry.
I totally appreciate what Commissioner Jarreau Isaacson had to say, and as another person of color on the commission, it really touched me. So, it added to the complexity of the whole picture that I am wrestling with as a person of color on the commission. I wanted to address the allegations that a number of persons who've been speaking at the hearing said, which is that the commission is a generally white volunteer group, not elected, hence not accountable to anybody, and the city council as the elected group is accountable. And our mandate that we're appointed is at the heart of being able to be an independent body and not be beholden to anybody else, in a sense. With that, with the council being accountable and being elected, it's unfortunate that the council didn't have any public engagement and get any input as the group closest to the public. And it is a shame that Wards 6 and 9, the highest of people of color, continue to have a very, very difficult time to this day from all the strife that the Floyd murder caused. To Commissioner Schwarzkopf's suggestions about a plan, I may have missed some of it, so forgive me if I'm repeating anything he said. But I think engaging the police chief is critical. We have a police chief of color. To have this conversation that goes around him, over him, bypasses him, is very disrespectful to any person of color, much less a chief of any agency. Additionally, a good staffing audit of the MPD would be helpful, and a thorough examination of the Police Federation. I don't know that it's been explicitly said, but my suspicion is that much of the racist tension may lie in the culture of the Federation. And coming back to what Commissioner Jerome Isaacson mentioned about hearing this isn't the right time repeatedly, I like Commissioner Kozak's response in that there are plenty, the to-do list is plenty long to take action now and not wait for anything to be on the ballot. And one thing that was mentioned in the city attorney's opinion is that a amendment over 1,000 words, I believe, ought to be accompanied by a plan, an implementation plan, and that speaks to how the charter should not be the body for policy. And having a plan, having conversations on multiple levels to prepare for this on the ballot next year, when it is a municipal-focused ballot, and the city council members are also up on the ballot, I think it's a very appropriate coalescing of both council members and this ballot question. Thank you for taking my comment.
Thank you, Commissioner Garcia. Chair Clegg, did you have another comment?
Just a quick follow-up. I know a couple people have said we don't need additional time to consider this amendment. I think we do. We need additional time to get public input. We've had one public hearing on this, and 50 people called in, and most of them spoke against it. I think we have an obligation before we put something on the ballot to inform the public. Probably most people who are charter junkies don't even know that this is being considered right now. And also to listen to the public and see what they want. So I think the effect of the proposed amendment is clear, it's simple, it's elegant, it's well-crafted, but the public has not had an opportunity to comment or be informed. So, thank you.
Thank you, Chair Clegg. Commissioner Mecci?
Hello, thank you for letting me speak. I was just going to sit back and listen, but when other folks not on the work group put forward to talk, I thought I'd say a couple of things. I want to really appreciate Commissioner Isaacson for his thoughtful approach to this, for his willingness to engage people in conversation and to kind of dig a little deeper. I totally appreciate Commissioner Garcia's points. And I also, as someone who lives in the 9th Ward, we have had in this city an unprecedented amount of violence. We have had 256 gunshots with wounded people. We have had 37 homicides. We have had an unprecedented personal assaults, aggravated assaults happening in the 3rd and the 5th precinct. And so to me, it's very important to not wait and to move ahead with change, but to also do it in a responsible fashion. People are saying, what's next? Who's going to respond? Is there a plan? And the fact that the city council didn't percolate this and take it through work groups and take it through public hearings and engage folks, to me, is very concerning because it's non-transparent. And I will add to that I was at a 2-hour meeting this afternoon and learned that there are many things already happening outside of the 1 year process to work with people, the council is moving ahead. With that, the chief wants to convene work groups as well and listen to folks. And so I think that it's important to figure out how to have transparency in this process, what the timeline is, what we're doing, how we're going to approach it. I am very concerned as a citizen who is living with 911 calls and ducking gunfire day in and day out in the city of Minneapolis. That's it.
Thank you, Commissioner Mepchi. Commissioner Abbott?
Is my hand still up?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
I don't have anything further.
Okay, Commissioner Kozak, do you have your hand up again or not?
No.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I see no other hands up. I just would like to add my 2 cents, if now is the time, which is I've certainly listened very carefully to what everyone is saying, and to me, one of the most important things is to thank Commissioner Jerome Isaacson as well, and especially to take to heart what you said and what Commissioner Garcia said. I have been going back and forth as I've been listening to all the comments, because I think that the comments both in support and not in support of the amendment are well taken. But I end up falling on the side of supporting the Commissioner Jerome Isaacson's amendment. One reason is that I think was mentioned before is that its simplicity, but also it has the advantage of having something on the ballot when the outcry is so strong, to have something on the ballot to start the conversation and to keep people engaged. And this particular amendment has a lot of value and a lot of worth, because there's nothing that requires a plan. It's simply removing a provision that shouldn't have been in the charter in the first place. The way I see it also is that it may force the mayor and the city council actually to come together to work on the issues that need working on. And I think they need all the help they can get, and they should be working together and not at odds with each other. I know that's idealistic, but it seems to me that it would be helpful to have this ballot provision to start that. It preserves, in my view, it preserves the police department. And I don't see this as anything controversial, partly because the city council has already stepped back from the dismantling language they used originally. And I think that if they want to dismantle the police department at some point in the future, there's a lot of state legislation they're going to need to get first before they can do that. And finally, this amendment doesn't preclude whatever else the city wants to do to accomplish this police reform that they're promising now and have been promising for years. The charter now gives them the discretion to form a new department. If their goal is to form this new department, they don't need a charter change to do it. It's already in the charter. So for all those reasons, and particularly out of respect for the comments made by Commissioner Jerome Isaacson and Commissioner Garcia, I do support the amendment, and will look forward to further discussion tomorrow. Any other comments or questions? This is a question, I guess, for Chair Clegg. Since the motion is going to be in front of the full commission tomorrow, do we need a motion now, or do we just make a report as to our discussion?
I think we could do either one, whichever this group prefers. We could go forward, we could take a vote now and go forward with a recommendation, or we could just go to the commission and recount the discussion that we've had and go around the horn and at the full commission, much like we've just done here, and then vote.
Okay. I frankly would prefer just reporting our discussion today, but if anybody objects, please say so. And we have a bunch of comments. First, Commissioner Schwarzkopf had your hand up.
Yes, I'm sure I did have my hand up. I would prefer to bring forth a recommendation to the full Charter Commission tomorrow. I prefer to have the Charter Commission really spend some time going thoroughly into this. We've heard from a large group of people who are organized, who want the City Council amendment, but are they really the people? Are they really talking for every individual person in the city? I think that we could work out with some consultant a method for them to go into the city to find out what really the people, you know, the person living and renting a house or living in a tent or whatever, what they really want in regards to public safety. And I think once we know what they really want, then we need to have that group take a look at what is the way we're organized today and does that do it? And if it doesn't do it, then we need to figure out what is the best way of doing it. There are a lot of consultants, and I've been working with a number of different people given to me by the International City Managers Association who have been doing this all over the United States, and they have a lot of skill in this area. And I would think that the kind of amendment or kind of a report we should bring back tomorrow is that we need to really have somebody like that working with us so that we can go ahead and provide the proper structure for good public safety in Minneapolis.
Thank you. Commissioner Perry?
Yes, I would suggest a recommendation by the work group. I mean, one of the things that will come out of this work group, I expected our work product for the original proposal to be a report, some sort of consolidation. And if we didn't all agree on that, you know, maybe there's a minority report in that. But one of the things that you talked about at the beginning was that there would be some sort of work product that people could look at. And I think while we might not, because we maybe not put as much time into this, need a report, I do think knowing that the body did deliberate. I mean, we've taken a lot of time today and at the last meeting to talk about this. I think having the rest of the commission have a starting point for what I expect to be a very fulsome conversation tomorrow, that we have a recommendation to start with that people can work from. So that's my comment on that.
Thank you. Maybe what I should do at this point is just ask if somebody has a motion then. Commissioner Perry?
Sure, I would move to recommend that, let's see, do you want a motion on what I just said, or do you want on whether we have a recommendation or a report, or do you want a recommendation on what that would be? What's the motion?
I think a recommendation.
Okay, so I would move that we thank Al for his work on this, but we are recommending it not be put on the ballot this time.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any further discussion? Commissioner Jerome Isaacson?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Commissioners. So I'll be voting no on this motion, And I'm going to assume that taking more time on my amendment, it probably means that we're going to do the same thing with the city council's proposal. And so I'm also opposed to that. So I'll be voting no on this one. And since my more simpler amendment is needing more time, it sounds like that's what we're going to do with the city council as well.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? Hearing none? I'm sorry, Chair Clegg.
One thing I want to confirm. So an aye vote is a vote to not put this on the ballot in 2020, correct?
Correct.
I should have been clearer about that. Sorry about that.
Commissioner Abbott here. I hate to be hyper technical, but an aye vote is a vote to recommend to the commission as a whole that it vote not to put this on the ballot. So
correct.
Correct. Thank you. Okay, if we're ready to vote on it, we'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Chair Clegg.
Aye.
Commissioner Jerome Isaacson.
No.
Commissioner Kozak.
Aye.
Commissioner Perry.
Aye.
Commissioner Schwarzkopf.
Aye.
Commissioner Rubenstein.
No.
There are 4 ayes and 2 nays.
Okay. Thank you. So we have a motion which has prevailed to recommend to the full commission tomorrow that this amendment not go on the ballot. Commissioner Jerome Isaacson, you have your hand up?
No, I'm sorry. Let me lower my hand here. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
So Commissioner Rubenstein, at tomorrow's meeting, I will call on you to present the report before we begin general discussion.
Okay, thank you. And I see that Commissioner Perry is providing a draft motion to our city clerk.
Actually, it's the other way around.
Oh, okay. Thank you. So, is there any other business that anybody would like to raise at this point?
Just a reminder that we are having a public hearing in about 45 minutes. The speakers will be, this is a public hearing on the council proposed amendment, and the speakers will be limited to the, I believe there are 53 of them who were signed up for our second public hearing, but we didn't get to. So this will mean we've given everyone who signed up at one of our public hearings a chance to testify. Since this is a repeat, there may be a fair number of people who won't be on the call and won't choose to participate, but I think it's important that we give them that option. So please log back in 45 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Clegg, and thank everybody who has participated in this discussion for a substantive and very compelling discussion. So thank you.
Thank you, Madam.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And with that, we've concluded all business to come before the Charter Commission's Public Safety Work Group. And so without objection, we stand adjourned.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
This meeting is no longer being recorded or transcribed.